He walked out while our daughter had a fever and I was pitching to the board, just left his key on the counter and vanished. No note, no warning, no goodbye. And the worst part, I didn't fall apart. I got strategic. This isn't the story of how he left. It's the story of what I did next. Some stories don't begin with fireworks. Some begin in silence, like the sound of a front door clicking shut. Before everything fell apart, my life looked stable, predictable even. I had a strong job title, senior marketing manager at a global sustainability firm. I spent my days building campaigns that made companies look green and my nights picking dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets off a toddler's plate. My husband Mark worked in tech consulting. He traveled a lot, came home less and less, and seemed to shrink in emotional availability with every promotion he got. And me? I'm Emma Thompson. I was 36 years old when everything changed. Sophie, our daughter, had just turned 3. She had my curls and Mark's dimples. Every time she laughed, the world softened around her. She was the one constant I clung to in those last hollow months. Our marriage had been thinning quietly. No screaming matches, just distance, the kind you feel more than see. I had gotten used to falling asleep alone, used to rescheduling plans, used to not asking questions I didn't want answers to. Still, I didn't expect him to leave. Not like that. Not on the day everything was stacked against me. It was a Thursday morning. Sophie had been burning up all night. I had a board-level presentation scheduled for 9 a.m., a pitch that could move my entire division into global strategy. I asked Mark if he could take Sophie to the pediatrician. He didn't answer. He just zipped his bag, dropped his house key on the granite countertop, and walked out the door. No explanation, no goodbye, just the click of the lock behind him. At first, I thought maybe he needed air. Maybe it was a moment. But by evening, his phone was off. His mother was as shocked as I was. That day, everything collapsed, and I had a choice: fall with it or stand still and let the dust settle around me. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have known, is that his exit would become my entry point into the best version of my life. The hours after Mark walked out felt like slow suffocation. Sophie's fever had climbed to 102. I was pacing with her on my hip, her tiny body limp against mine, when my phone buzzed. 2 minutes until my Zoom presentation. I propped her up with one arm, opened my laptop with the other, and clicked join while murmuring lullabies through clenched teeth. I don't remember much of what I said in that meeting. I hit all my points, I think. There were charts, investor interest, a sustainability roadmap for Southeast Asia. But inside, I was unraveling. Every ding of a Slack message sounded like a bomb. Every question felt like a test I was failing in slow motion. When it ended, I closed the laptop and sat motionless. Sophie whimpered, asking for her dad. I told her he had a meeting. I didn't know what else to say. By late afternoon, reality settled in like cold fog. Mark hadn't just left the house. He had shut down our joint bank account access. I found out when I tried to order Sophie's medicine online and my card declined. I sat there staring at the rejected payment, the spinning loading wheel, and thought, this isn't a fight. This is war. I texted him. No response. I called. Voicemail. I even emailed him from my work account, thinking maybe, just maybe, he'd respond to something formal. Nothing. Then his mother called. Emma, she whispered, Mark told me he needed space. He said you'd understand. Is everything okay? That's when it hit me. He'd prepped his exit. He'd rewritten the story. To his family, I was the stressed-out wife, the one who pushed too hard, the one who didn't appreciate him. He didn't just walk out on us. He framed his departure like he was the one escaping. I opened our shared photo folder, hundreds of pictures, Sophie's birth, our first apartment, a New Year's Eve kiss in Iceland, all of it, proof of a life, now reduced to artifacts. And suddenly, I noticed it. A whole album was gone, deleted, the one from our 5th anniversary trip to Tokyo. That's when I knew he wasn't coming back. He wasn't waiting to cool off. He was erasing the marriage, systematically, like a man cleaning his fingerprints off a doorknob. I curled up on the bathroom floor that night, Sophie asleep beside me on a folded towel, and I let myself feel the full weight of it. Not just the betrayal, but the precision of it, the cowardice of leaving when it costs the other person the most. But somewhere buried under the heartbreak was a flicker of something else, a slow, cold clarity. He had walked out, and someday I would walk out too, but on my own terms. The days that followed blurred together like storm clouds on repeat. I functioned, barely. Wake up, temperature check, emails, reheat oatmeal, pediatrician, investor decks. Sophie clung to me like a vine. She didn't understand what was happening, only that Daddy went to work and forgot to come back. I didn't correct her. I stopped brushing my hair. I wore the same 3 shirts on rotation. The world had split into 2 halves, the part I could keep running and the part I couldn't fix. Nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed with a baby monitor next to me and stare at the empty space Mark used to fill. I kept wondering, had he been planning this for months? Did every smile I'd given him in those last weeks bounce off a man already halfway gone? One night, I opened our joint calendar. His travel dates were there, but so were blank spots, weeks where he said he was in Seattle, but now I wasn't so sure. I cross-checked with old text messages. The math didn't add up. Had he been cheating? Part of me didn't want to know. The other part needed to. I sent a message to Rachel, my closest friend, and the only one I trusted with the truth. We met at work years ago. She'd seen our marriage from the inside and never liked how Mark dismissed me during group dinners or how often I apologized for making things complicated. When I told her he left, her response was immediate. Of course he did it when everything was on fire. That's who he's been becoming for years. The comment hit hard. She wasn't shocked. She had expected it, even if I hadn't. That hurt more than I was ready to admit. Meanwhile, at work, something strange started happening. My team, young, sharp, mostly female, began picking up my slack without making a show of it. One of them, Priya, quietly forwarded me a note from a board member who had praised my presentation. I hadn't even read the post-call email chain. That tiny act of kindness cracked something open in me. I wasn't alone. I still had value. Even in this mess, my work had weight. But at home, it was still just me and Sophie. I started journaling after she went to bed. Some nights I wrote letters to Mark I'd never send. Some nights I just wrote bullet points. Felt hollow, ate toast, got the deck signed off. Sophie laughed when the dog on TV fell over. It was small, but it was mine. And then, one evening, I found a manila envelope shoved in the mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside, divorce papers already signed on his end. No message, no explanation, just a line under irreconcilable differences. That night, I stood in the kitchen, the same granite counter where he'd left his key, and made a decision. I was done reacting. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to chase. I wasn't going to collapse in a way that made him the center of my life's downfall. If he wanted out, fine. But I wasn't leaving the house, the job, or the future he thought I couldn't handle without him. I'd stay exactly where he left me and rise from that spot like smoke. Something shifted the morning after I received the divorce papers. I woke up before Sophie. The house was still, sunlight barely edging across the carpet. I walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer with the unopened mail, and calmly began sorting it into piles. Rent, utilities, credit card, medical receipts, things Mark used to handle, or so I thought. The control I had surrendered for the sake of balance was now mine by default, and for the first time, I didn't panic. I got out a pen, I made a list. Step 1, get legal advice. Step 2, reroute my salary into a separate account. Step 3, dig into our financial history. Not out of vengeance, not yet, but out of necessity. I wasn't going to let him strand us and pretend it was mutual. I called an old colleague, Nora, who had left the corporate world to become a family lawyer. We hadn't spoken in years. I expected a 10-minute consultation. Instead, she invited me for coffee the next morning and walked me through every paper he had sent. "Emma," she said gently, "this agreement is laughably skewed. He's counting on you being too overwhelmed to push back." That lit a fire under me. Later that night, I opened a bottle of wine, cheap, bitter, and clicked into our old tax records. I wasn't looking for dirt, just answers. What I found wasn't explosive, but it was enough. Private transfers to a personal account he hadn't mentioned. Large withdrawals under consulting reimbursements that never went through our shared account. Nothing illegal, but plenty unethical. And something else. A sudden courage in the quiet. I turned off my laptop and looked around. Same furniture, same walls, but the atmosphere was different. Less haunted. I pulled out my old vision board from the hall closet, the one I made during my MBA program, long before Sophie, before Mark, before compromise. It was dusty, bent at the corners, but still there. I put it up on the fridge. That was the night I realized he had left, but I was still here, and I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to make it count. I didn't announce my next steps, I didn't change my social media bio or post cryptic quotes about healing. I just moved, quietly, deliberately. I started with money. With Nora's help, I froze the joint account, opened a new one in my name, and rerouted my paycheck. I hired a forensic accountant, something I never thought I'd need, to track Mark's personal withdrawals. Turns out a lot of those consulting reimbursements had gone to fund what looked suspiciously like a second life. High-end dinners, hotel stays in cities he never told me he visited, and a recurring charge for a luxury gym chain, in someone else's name. Still, I didn't confront him. That would give him too much narrative control. I wanted the truth to sit quietly and weigh on him like an unpaid debt. Next, I turned inward. I met with my boss privately and told her what had happened. Not the tabloid version, just the essentials. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "Emma, take the reins. Let's put you in front of the next round table. Full strategy lead." That single line rewired something in me. I had been waiting, years maybe, for someone to ask me to step up. Now they were. So I did. I rewrote the marketing proposal, infused it with sharper data, more bite. I added new metrics, crafted a proposal for a Southeast Asia expansion that included female-led eco-startups. The board noticed. I also started showing up differently, more solid, less apologetic. I stopped ending emails with "just checking in" and started saying, "Here's the update." I stopped shrinking in meetings and began owning the room like it was my birthright. Meanwhile, the whispers about Mark had started, not from me, from his own unraveling. Turns out, when you build your professional image on being a grounded family man, people notice when the ground disappears. A former client emailed me saying she'd been confused when Mark referred to himself as independent while still working under our firm's name. I forwarded that to HR. No drama, just documentation. Behind the scenes, I was building something, my own brand, my own leverage. I started posting about sustainable leadership on LinkedIn, small articles at first, then webinars, then invitations. Slowly, I began stepping out from under his shadow. People weren't asking where Mark had gone. They were asking how I'd managed to lead through so much upheaval with so much grace. The truth was, I didn't feel graceful. I felt forged, hardened by fire, but I let them think what they wanted. I wasn't done yet. One night, I looked at the apartment and realized it was still his space, his style, his leather couch, his wall art. So I packed it all up. Every last piece. I sold some, donated most. I used the cash to buy new things, piece by piece. A round dining table where I could sit with Sophie and eat without staring at the empty chair. By the time the final bank report came in, proof of financial misconduct, I didn't even flinch. I didn't need revenge in the traditional sense, I just needed a clean break. But I would make sure he didn't walk away without consequence. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Monday. Sharp suits, polished phrases, and high stakes decision making. It was the biggest presentation of my career. The entire sustainability division's funding structure was up for review, and I was the one pitching the new direction. As I stood outside the glass conference room straightening my blazer, I felt calm. Not performative calm, but real, earned stillness. I had built this strategy piece by piece while raising a toddler, recovering from betrayal, and rebuilding my foundation from rubble. I stepped into the room and paused. Across the table, I saw someone I hadn't expected. Mark. He wasn't there as a board member or even as a guest. He was seated next to a former investor, apparently now advising on digital transformation. He looked smaller than I remembered. His suit didn't quite fit. His presence didn't shake me. He glanced up, caught my eye, and froze. I offered a polite nod, then turned to the room. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "I'm Emma Thompson. I've led the regional strategy team for the last 5 years, and today I'm presenting our proposed shift into gender-focused environmental entrepreneurship." I spoke for 15 minutes. Every data point, every policy proposal, every projection, it landed. People nodded, scribbled notes, leaned forward. When I finished, I clicked to the last slide, a timeline with my proposed rollout, ending in a regional expansion and my formal appointment to lead it. A pause, then applause. The chairwoman leaned in. "Emma, this is comprehensive, thoughtful, and honestly, overdue." She turned to the others. "I think it's time we stop treating her like a deputy and start treating her like the architect of our next chapter." My chest burned, but not with fear, with quiet pride. Across the table, Mark shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't the center of the conversation. He wasn't even a footnote. And that was the moment I realized I didn't need to punish him. Life had already demoted him to background noise. After the meeting, he approached me in the hallway. "You look good," he said, hesitant. I smiled, cool and unbothered. "Thank you, I am." He opened his mouth to say more. Maybe to explain, maybe to justify, but I didn't give him the space. I stepped aside, nodded once, and walked away. That night, I came home to Sophie dancing barefoot in the kitchen, her curls bouncing to music I couldn't hear. I scooped her up, held her close, and laughed until I cried. Later, I opened my laptop to a message from a women's leadership conference. "Emma, we'd love to have you speak on resilience through change." I stared at the screen and realized I wasn't rebuilding. I was already built. He had walked out of my life like a man walking away from a burning house he thought I couldn't rebuild. But what he didn't know, what he never understood, is that the fire didn't consume me. It refined me. A year passed, almost to the day. I didn't mark the anniversary with sadness. It was just another Tuesday. Sophie had her preschool art show that afternoon. She'd painted a family, her and me, 2 stick figures holding hands under a bright orange sun. No mention of her father, not out of pain, but absence, like a character who simply exited the scene and never returned. We had moved to a new apartment by then, smaller, sunnier, the kind of place where everything had a purpose, even the silence. There were no ghosts in the walls, no shadows from what used to be, just light, books, crayons on the floor, and the sound of tiny feet running down the hallway. I had officially taken over the sustainability division, and our new initiative had launched in 3 countries. I traveled when I needed to, but always came home. I no longer checked Mark's social media, no longer tracked what city he was in or who he was with. He had tried once, months back, to arrange a meeting. He said he wanted to talk about what happened. I replied with a single sentence, "There's nothing to fix, Mark." It ended exactly how it needed to. And that was that. Forgiveness didn't come in a wave. It came in small moments, folding Sophie's laundry, watching the sunset without feeling grief, laughing so hard at dinner with friends that I forgot why I'd ever been afraid of being alone. I stopped defining myself by what I had lost, I started building by what I could grow. People asked me often how I got through it. I told them the truth. Not all storms come to break you, some come to clear the path. And once the storm passed, I saw myself clearly. Not someone abandoned, someone released. The night Sophie called me her mommy hero, I was wiping spaghetti sauce off her chin. She said it so casually, like it was a fact, like how the sky is blue or dogs go woof. I smiled, swallowed the lump in my throat, and kissed her forehead. That small moment reminded me what this journey was really about. Not revenge, not survival, not even strength in the way people usually mean it, but clarity and choice. I chose not to let his exit define me. I chose to stay standing in the silence he left behind and rebuild a life richer than what we ever had together. I don't wear bitterness like a badge. I wear grace, earned, not gifted. Some people asked, "Do you think he regrets leaving?" Maybe, maybe not. That part isn't mine to carry. What is mine is this life, this daughter, this voice, and the hundreds of women I've met since who've whispered, "I didn't think I could survive either until I heard your story." So here it is. My husband walked out at the worst time, and I walked into my best life. Not in one step, not without pain, but step by steady step. And if you're watching this, holding pieces of a life someone else shattered, I want you to know something. You're not broken. You're just unfinished. Let the silence become your starting line. Let the absence make room for everything better. You can walk forward, one quiet, powerful step at a time. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever been left behind and had to rebuild, please subscribe, share, or leave a comment below. Your story matters too. Let's walk into our best lives together.